Hey good people, and welcome back to the channel. Over the course of this video, I'll be sharing my thoughts and feelings on episode 3 of Ready to Love Miami. And because this review is coming out the next day, I will simply be giving my thoughts on the connections that were formed this episode, as well as what I thought about the cast members that were nominated for elimination. So without any further delay, let's jump right in. I think it's important to mention that right off the bat, Jay was not in this episode. Now, because the men have the power to eliminate, I think that Jay would have been completely safe from elimination tonight, unless she had some unforeseeable meltdown in front of the men. But in this episode, we get the return of Looney, who is thicker than week-old oatmeal. Sweet Jesus. She goes on a date with LJ, and to my surprise, LJ was the only guy that asked for her number, and he's the only guy that's been checking in on her. From this episode, it seems like Looney prefers a guy who likes to chase after her. But she doesn't appear to be as self-absorbed as Sabrina from last season. There appears to be some genuineness with Looney, and while I think she appreciates LJ's efforts, in my opinion, Looney would prefer that some of the other men on the show give her that same level of attention. It seems like LJ is all in with Looney, and I don't blame him. But I fear that when another guy comes along, Looney will kick LJ to the curb. We then get to see Shakira and Zoe go out on a date. And we have to keep it real for a moment. I don't think for one moment that Shakira is interested in Zoe. I think that she is all in with Samson, but she was getting in with Zoe's good graces just so that she had one other guy that could protect her from elimination. One of the things that I noticed from Shakira this episode was that when she was with Zoe, she put him on blast for not asking for her phone number. And I can see both sides on this. In Zoe's mind, he wanted to know if Shakira was worth talking to on the phone, and up until this point, he had other women on his radar. But Shakira is attracted to men like Samson, which is a guy who lets it be known that he desires her. But going forward, I don't see Shakira giving Zoe the time of day unless the men have the power to eliminate. We then get to see Samson going on a date with Charisse, and from their interaction, it's clear that there's some mutual attraction between the two of them. But they also seem to be using each other to make it as far on the show as they can. During their first meeting, we get to see a clip of Charisse texting on her phone as Samson is trying to talk to her. But during this episode's date, we see Charisse spilling some food on her thighs just to see if Samson would come in and help a lady out in need. And what does Samson do? He moves in quicker than Popeyes could run out of chicken, and with one hand on her tender yet juicy thigh, Samson carefully removes the food particles from her clothes. So while I acknowledge the flirting that's going on between the two of them, I don't really see it going anywhere unless Shakira drops the ball with Samson. Towards the midway part of the episode, we get a group outing with Mike, Justice, and Swayze, as well as Kayla, Looney, Charisse, and April. And before you say it, yes, there are more women than men, and historically speaking, these type of group outings usually don't go well for one person. For this outing, the odd person out was April. It was a little embarrassing to watch her go above and beyond the call of duty just to flirt with Mike when it was clear that he didn't want any parts of her. It seemed a little desperate, and at this point in the journey, Mike has too many options to entertain April. One interesting connection that happened during the scene was with Justice and Looney. While I firmly believe that Justice may have a stronger connection with some of the other women, I think that Looney is feeling him more than she is LJ. And I think Looney is wishing that Justice would step up like LJ did. Swayze and Kayla share a brief scene together, and by this time, Swayze has at least 3 strong connections with the women on the show. I don't think that Kayla is the strongest connection, but I do think Swayze views Kayla as someone to have a good time with. We then get a scene of Trinika meeting Randall at the restaurant. And I'm convinced that the more I see Trinika on the show, the better her chances are for being a lock for the finale. It seems like Trinika and Randall have the potential for a great chemistry with one another. And what I liked about Trinika was her ability to intrigue a guy without being overly flirtatious with him. Charisse and April could have learned a thing or two from Trinika from this episode. We then have a group date featuring Mike, Kadian, Brandy, and Swayze. I think the most significant thing that happened during this date was the friction between Mike and Kadian. What I noticed about Mike thus far is that if he's really feeling a woman, he tends to open up to her. But if he's not feeling them, he tends to talk his way out of a connection, and that usually gets him in trouble. Mike and Kadian clashed because Kadian's personality was a little too strong for him to handle. And to be fair, Mike also has a strong personality, and he has a tendency to bump heads with women who don't play the submissive role with him. And because of this, I still think that Brandy is Mike's top connection. They mesh better together, and there's mutual attraction. But towards the end of the episode, the men nominated Kadian and April for elimination. And if you have the opportunity to check out my review from last week, then you would know that I predicted that the men would nominate Charisse, April, and Kadian as their bottom 3, and April would likely be the one to go home. I hate to say it, but I told you so. In the final scene of the episode, Swayze meets up with Kadian to let her know that she's safe from elimination. But prior to letting Kadian know the good news, Swayze essentially throws the other guys under the bus while making Kadian think that he was the only one that was trying to save her from elimination. And I think that was a weak move from a masculine standpoint, but from a strategic standpoint, Kadian will likely be gunning for the other guys to send home during next week's elimination. Then we get to see LJ meeting up with April to let her know that she's getting the boot. And I truly commend April for being able to handle the news with grace, and I like the energy that she gave during her elimination scene. But overall, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would rate this episode a 2. The episode was pretty much predictable in my eyes, and before the season even started, I predicted that April and Dominica would be the first 2 to get eliminated from the women's side. And this is because I take a realistic approach in understanding how the show works. The downside is, if viewers already know who's going to get voted off before the episode airs, then it takes away from the mystery and anticipation. Now, because the women have the power to eliminate next week, I predict that LJ, Zoe, and Mike will be in the ladies' bottom, but I think that LJ or Zoe may ultimately be given the boot from the competition. But this marks the end of my review. If you have any comments related to the episode or my review, feel free to leave them below in the comment section, and I'll be sure to reply to everybody. Until next time, stay tuned and stay safe. Peace.